Michael, I want to just jump right in and start by asking you about the inspiration behind the underlying concepts and theories in this film. What are the origins of these things?
Inspiration for the film and themes, it comes a long way. I worked on this movie for the better part of 8 years with my co-writer and collaborator, Ben Neighbors. And I think, we early on talked about our own relationship with sound, both individuals who moved to New York City and weren't from there originally, and I think we thought about the way sound affected us and played into our lives on a daily basis a lot, and I think whether or not people realize it or not, it's this thing where we all have a relationship with sound, and a lot of times subconsciously. And I think we're not scientists, but we're interested in science, we're interested in music, and we wanted to explore those things through this character. And it started through this idea for this house tuner character, and we thought he was this great kind of conduit to tell a story about sound. And yeah, I suppose our interest in the way sound is playing into our lives.
This is based on a short film. So talk to us about the journey. That was a jury award-winning film in 2013 called Palimpsest, and it went on to do dozens of other festivals. What was that journey like from short to feature?
Well, it's a long journey. I first started working. It was in 2011. I was in California when I first read the idea that Ben had sent me of kind of an outline for a short story called Palimpsest, and it had this character of this house tuner in it. And I really liked this character. Suddenly, I could picture, him wearing a tweed blazer and carrying a satchel, and I love the idea of someone kind of walking around with musical instrument equipment, but wasn't a musician. And so that was the germ of the idea, and adapted that into a screenplay and turned it into a short film just for a short film. I really liked that medium, but it was never intended to be anything else. And we played it back in 2013. It played at Sundance, and I think we saw that there was, it was resonating with audiences. There was a conversation around it, and it got kind of Ben and I organically thinking about, well, do we have a bigger story here? We like this character. Can we kind of build more around his world? And we took a year to, draft it out as a feature. And I'd like to say that we just jumped in and made the movie, but somehow 6 or 7 years pass, and it takes a long time to convince, I suppose, the powers that be, the financiers, that it's worthy to tell a movie about a somewhat kind of autodidactic scientist who lives in a basement and is obsessed with sound. So it was a learning moment for me to understand kind of what works on the page, and how to convince people. But fortunately, with that time, you get to develop and iron things out more, which I never think is a bad thing. Not maybe a sustainable practice as a filmmaker and to make a career, but when all is said and done, it's part of making the movie. But a very long process, and then we finally found like-minded people, and sometime during that process, I was able to get the script to Peter Sarsgaard, who I had dreamed about being in this role for quite a long time. And to my surprise, when we finally did get him the script and was attached with a love letter that I wrote him, it was within a couple days that we were sitting down and talking about the role. And I found in him, this kind of kindred spirit to the character that he was playing, someone as an actor and a human being just obsessed with sound and considers himself to have perfect pitch or absolute pitch. And, then suddenly once you start getting stars attached, everything kind of starts moving along very quickly.
Well, in terms of that score and the dovetailing of all these elements, because we've got score, we've got sound design, we also got sound cues, which I want to talk about. But the score is so dreamlike and spare, and it's yet very nuanced and occasionally very jolting. And for me, it references kind of is an oral reference to the concepts in the film, and also has a very specific way of evoking New York, which I thought was really very striking. Can you talk about how you achieved all of that?
Well, I guess in that very, very early conversation, we had talked a lot about early electronic music, like early 20th century composers, and we talked about jazz, we talked about Peter's character, and he has this very evolved sense of music, and it's very advanced and intellectual, but at the same time, he's very precise and methodical. So I guess the first thing that instinctually I just started writing very kind of intricate, complex stuff. And then ultimately taking a sledgehammer to all of it and paring it away to its most simple form, its simplest state. And that was one of the joys of the collaboration, I think, was really like getting to the heart of who he is as a, you know, there's something about, you know, trying to reference all of these sort of specifically very highly evolved intellectual musical ideas, but also not just like overwhelm you with that. So to be spared seemed to be quite important. But yeah, we talked a lot about the theremin and the instrument that's really featured the most in the score is actually a ondes martinet, which is a 1920s French electronic instrument. It's kind of like a very precise theremin. It's like on a key bed, and you put your finger on it's on a wire, and you put your finger in a ring, and you can kind of play it's very precise, and you play the velocity with your left hand, and with your right hand you're kind of going up and down the keyboard with this thing. And it just seemed to really work for him to have that kind of, it's very haunting, but it's also something kind of intricate, and I don't know, it's like a plain song sometimes as well.
What was the experience of working with a cast like that? I mean, you have performances from Austin Pendleton, Tony Revolori, Rashida Jones, Peter Skarsgård. I mean, I know you said that Peter was the first one to the cast. How did this all come together, and what was it like working with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm lucky that I was able to get such a great cast. You know, on my first feature, I suppose had a lot of passion to get each one of them specifically. They were, you know, all Austin Pendleton. I'm glad you brought him up. He was someone who I've always loved as like a New York character actor, and can kind of do anything. And he had coincidentally worked with Peter. He had directed Peter actually on Broadway. So they kind of, I love that in real life they had this kind of mentor, you know, relationship already. And it's you know, Peter is a very generous actor. I found he's usually you know, if he has ideas, it's usually to kind of give his lines out or to cut back what he's actually saying, which I, you know, really appreciate, and is very modest and humbling to watch as an actor. But you know, I think it's such a great privilege to be able to you know, work with these things that you've had in your head for so long, and to finally have it vocalized. One of the first things that Peter and I did when he came on was we sat down in my apartment and just recorded the entire script. We had you know, I read every single other role and he read all of his, but suddenly it was I realized I had this kind of radio drama version of the movie after that I can listen to, and I just ended up using that as a tool, and then suddenly started adding music cues and images on a timeline on my computer, and I kind of felt like I could just watch the movie, and then all I had to do was, you know, go out and shoot and fill in those pieces. But it was this great kind of blueprint to have going in. So I was fortunate to, you know, to work with actors who were very generous with their time and, you know, passionate about the work. And it was, you know, I say filmmaking is often a pure form of collaboration, and I think that's certainly true with all of the, you know, the cast that comes together to do this. And it's, you know, working with Rashida Jones, who is also, you know, a filmmaker and writer in her own right. I think she's always best when she was able to take scenes and, you know, kind of meld it on the day. And she's very quick at, you know, being able to kind of adapt things to what kind of works best for her. And so I was really just, I had a front row seat to be able to witness kind of these things happening in a great way.
Thank you both very much. I appreciate your comments tonight.